Hello and welcome to In Focus. Tonight, Ukraine is tightening the pressure on Russia where it hurts most: its money, its logistics, and its ability to sustain war. From sanctions targeting the so-called shadow fleet to growing financial cracks inside the Kremlin, the balance is shifting. Also, the truth they try to erase: how Ukraine is documenting every crime against the journalists who dare to tell the world what's really happening. With a massive budget deficit, the Kremlin has turned to selling gold, a core sign of a collapsing system. Meanwhile, Sweden's detention of shadow fleet tankers proves that Russia's maritime schemes are no longer safe. Ukraine and its partners are hitting the aggressor where it hurts most: the wallet. Details in our first report.
Sweden has detained a sanctioned tanker in the Baltic Sea. Sweden's Minister for Civil Defense, Carl Oskar Bolin, stated that the ship is suspected of being part of Russia's shadow fleet. The vessel was flying the Syrian flag, and its destination is unknown, according to the Swedish Coast Guard. A preliminary investigation has been launched regarding the ship's seaworthiness, as it is listed on several sanction lists, including those of the EU, Ukraine, and the UK. This year, Sweden has detained 5 ships suspected of various violations, including oil spills and flying under false flags, and has opened a criminal case against some crew members.
The Swedish Coast Guard suspects that the vessel is falsely flagged, as there are a number of uncertainties regarding the vessel's flag status, and that it therefore does not meet the requirements for seaworthiness as set out in international regulations and agreements, from a statement on the Swedish Coast Guard's website.
Ukraine is urging increased sanctions against Russia's shadow fleet. To effectively block it, experts estimate that between 200 and 400 more ships need to be targeted. Moreover, synchronizing strikes on Russia's defense sector would be essential. This move should block Russia's access to $400 billion in revenue and deny technologies needed for weapons production.
This is the place where we need to apply pressure first. Speaking about the size of Russia's shadow fleet, it accounts for 20% of the world's tanker fleet. Russia constantly changes flags, ship registrations, crews, names, and so on. There is a need for constant monitoring and tracking of these tankers, which is quite challenging. Ihor Krupka, head of analytical department, ANTS Network.
The importance of intensifying European sanctions was highlighted by President Volodymyr Zelensky during his speech at the European Political Community Summit in Yerevan. According to him, Ukraine's goals remain unchanged: bringing the war to a worthy end, strengthening Ukrainian air defense and energy support, and speeding up the implementation of the European loan of 90 billion euros.
And this summer will be a moment when Putin decides what to do next: expand the war or move to diplomacy, and we must push him toward diplomacy. Russia has announced a May 9 parade in Moscow without military equipment. If that happens, it will be the first time in many, many years they cannot afford military equipment, and they fear drones may buzz over Red Square. This is telling. It shows they are not strong now. So we must keep the pressure by sanctions on them.
While Ukraine continues to strengthen its defense against Russian aggression, the Kremlin is suffering from sanctions and attempting to fill the gaps in its budget. To do so, Russian dictator Putin signed a law to create a 6th gambling zone to fill the state treasury with taxes from gambling. According to the Moscow Times, new casinos will be located in the Altai Republic at a ski resort. This initiative came from Russia's Ministry of Finance at the end of last year. It was argued that the casinos would help develop the region and create jobs. Last year, the federal treasury had a deficit of over 8 trillion rubles, and in the first quarter of 2026, the deficit exceeded 4.6 trillion rubles.
In 3 months, they already have a deficit larger than they had planned for the entire year of 2026. Another objective indicator is the state of the regional budgets in Russia, where we see that there is no money even for the most basic things, where there is always a reserve fund in the budget system to quickly address the consequences of unforeseen circumstances. So we see that there is no money even to handle the aftermath of the heavy rainfall in Dagestan, which caused natural disasters.
In an attempt to save the federal budget, Russia is selling off gold. It has been accumulating for 20 years, reports Ukraine's Foreign Intelligence Service. The first sales of gold reserves began in November 2025. The central bank has started selling gold directly to domestic buyers, including banks, state companies, and individual investment structures.
This is not an immediate catastrophe, but the signal is important. A country that has demonstrated the accumulation of reserves as a sign of power is now depleting them. The budgetary maneuver is narrowing, and the very fact of transitioning to gold sales signals what Moscow would rather remain silent about. The financial stability of the system has disappeared. From a statement on the website of the Foreign Intelligence Service of Ukraine.
The detention of shadow fleet tankers, tightening sanctions, and financial pressure are gradually narrowing the Kremlin's ability to circumvent restrictions. While Moscow attempts to patch up its budget by selling gold and seeking new schemes, international pressure continues to mount, bringing closer the moment when Russia's economic resources for continuing the war will become critically limited. Reported by Karina Lalayan, UATV News.
As the Kremlin loses its economic grip, it turns its weapons against the truth. Journalists in Ukraine are being systematically targeted, not by accident, but by design. From drone strikes on film crews to the bombing of newsrooms, Russia is trying to blind the world. But we are documenting every crime for the upcoming tribunal. Watch the full report next.
We were standing with Alyona next to the car, and Yerevan stepped aside a bit to take some shots.
The tragic events of October 23rd of 2025 in Kramatorsk are still remembered by special correspondent of Freedom TV channel Oleksandr Kolichev in vivid detail. Even 6 months later, the film crew was at a petrol station where they had arrived to record the consequences of a recent shelling by the Russian army. At that moment, their car was attacked by a Russian Lancet drone. Correspondent Alyona Hramova and cameraman Yerevan Karmazin were killed on the spot. Oleksandr Kolichev sustained serious injuries.
Важкий момент був, коли десь за тиждень мені сказали, що друзі загинули, але...
The hardest moment was about a week later when I was told that my friends had died, although it seemed to me that they were further away from the impact site.
What happened in October last year was recounted by Oleksandr and the father of the deceased cameraman, Yerevan Karmazin, at a meeting of the Temporary Investigative Commission of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, which is investigating crimes committed by the Russian army against Ukrainian journalists. Oleksandr Karmazin says his son, together with his colleagues, had been showing the world the consequences of Russian aggression in Ukraine since the beginning of the full-scale war. He paid for it with his life.
I used to warn Yerevan. Lately, I kept warning him, son, be careful. Please, keep an eye on the sky. Even though they had all those detectors, as it turned out, it didn't help.
According to the Temporary Investigative Commission, 15 media workers have been killed while performing their professional duties during Russia's war against Ukraine. Another 26 are currently held in Russian captivity. Ukrainian newsrooms have also become targets for the Russian army. The editor-in-chief of the newspaper, Mezhevsky Meridian, says the town where they lived and worked is now in the red zone. Russian troops are destroying Mezhova, which is located on the border between Dnipropetrovsk and Donetsk regions. On March 29th, an aerial bomb was dropped directly on the building that had housed the newsroom for many decades.
Редакції немає. Просто останні було кілька атак. Останнє це був КАП чи ФАБ, як кажуть.
The newsroom simply no longer exists. There were several attacks. The last one was a glide bomb or a high-capacity aerial bomb. They say it might have been the 1,000th or 1,500th strike on Mezhova. I'm not sure. But the crater is the size of a two-story building. The first attack happened back in September. A Molniya drone struck directly into the editor's office. Next to the newsroom was the printing house. A glide bomb hit there, the roof of the newsroom was destroyed, and all the windows were blown out.
In November of 2025, the Russian army attacked the television center in Dnipro, where the Suspilne Dnipro newsroom was located. No one was in the building at the time of the attack, but the pavilions, equipment, and machinery were completely destroyed. In the Dnipropetrovsk region alone, around 10 different media outlets' editorial offices have become targets for Russian forces.
Редакція радіо FM.
The Nikopol FM radio station's newsroom was attacked in 2023, and broadcasting was stopped. It was the only FM station that broadcast to the occupied territory, to Enerhodar. We consider this a deliberate attack aimed at preventing us from working normally and informing people about what is happening.
To document all cases of Russian war crimes against journalists, Ukraine established a temporary investigative commission in December of 2025. It is responsible for collecting and documenting cases of systematic crimes against journalists and media workers, as well as compiling an evidence base. Journalists are a priority target for Russian occupiers.
Why are the Russians afraid of journalists? Because journalists document war crimes. The materials recorded by media workers can later be used in criminal cases. At the same time, these are attempts to intimidate by any means possible. We are now seeing physical destruction and cyber attacks specifically targeting journalists. The conclusion of this meeting is that journalists are a priority target for the Russian occupiers. We see crimes against journalists who have relocated from temporarily occupied territories.
All the facts collected so far will be presented by the Temporary Investigative Commission at the annual Parliamentary Assembly of the OSCE, which will take place in early July this year in The Hague. Reported by Natalia Husak, Volodymyr Zelensky from Dnipro, UATV News.
A country selling its gold to fund a war it cannot win is not a superpower. It's a fading regime. Ukraine stands strong, not because we seek sympathy, but because we possess the courage to prevail. We are documenting the crimes, we are draining the enemy's resources, and with the continued support of our partners, we are bringing this war to a just end. Thank you for watching In Focus. Don't forget to like this video and make sure to subscribe to our channel. We'll see you next time.